The expenditure you make on improving your property is a one-time expenditure that is depreciable. The amount of money you get from rent is in perpetuity. So don't try to save $1,000 on your renovation, because you'll end up giving up hundreds of $1,000s in potential rent that you could derive if you put that extra money into improvement of the property.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odum and Stephen Silverman.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odum, along with Stephen Silverman. Stephen, cam season.
Everybody's crunching numbers. You just walk past the desks and everybody's busy.
Lots of grouchy people. It's, cam, for those of you in multifamily and single family, you are under pressure for taxes, which is, we are too. But if you're doing any kind of industrial or retail or even office, usually in the leases, there's a common area maintenance expense that gets reconciled at the end of every year. And then if there's bumps, it gets passed on to the tenants. And so there's a lot of stress to try to get those numbers together from the end of the last year and then share those with our tenants and our landlords. So
talk about that, because that's an important point for investors, because how many times do we come across and people actually don't go through that exercise and don't pass on the additional expenses to tenants, and that just decreases their investment return.
Listen, I'm going to I'm going to throw some residential property managers under the bus. Frequently, they'll take a commercial property because someone asks them. They might handle a handful of the landlord's single family or multifamily investments, and then they ask them to handle their commercial stuff, and they don't even know how commercial leases are structured. And so frequently when we're taking on new clients, many times it's someone who was handling a residential property from the property manager, and they just don't know how to deal with the commercial. And so, we end up having to go back and reconstruct what CAM should be in the leases and go back and charge, because in many instances it's been years they haven't been charged, they haven't been updated. And, there's been pass-throughs of increased insurance and property management fees and real estate fees that, they have to be passed on to the tenant. And so we have to clean that up. But right now it's a tough time, because the accountants are banging us on the head and the landlords are banging us on the head, and they're trying to get those pass-throughs, reconciliations passed off on to the tenants so that they can recoup some of the expenses if they overpaid or underpaid from the previous years. So that's it's a fun time of the year, Stephen.
It sure is, and we have to get through it. And we will.
Yeah, it's fine. It's something every year. It comes just like taxes, the same thing. So our property manager is not very happy right now, and there's a lot of grumpiness in the office, but it's okay. In another month or so, we'll be through it. We've got a great guest today, though, Stephen. We're going to be talking multifamily on the construction side. Value add. Well,
multifamily is the biggest asset, and it's the one we get the most requests on from investors. So it's important to find out what's going on there and give our listeners an update.
Yeah, and give updates on construction. We've had a lot of disruption in the last couple of years with tariffs and COVID and everything else. And so I think it's important for investors to hear from someone in the construction trade that works on apartments to tell us what's going on. So, Stephen, unless you've got something else, let's roll in with our guest.
Let's do it.
Oh, hang on a second. I at least should have read a review that we got in from last week. Josh Chris says, entertaining, insightful, and actionable. Whether you're well-established as an investor or just starting out, carving out a profitable niche that's ready to grow, this is a must-listen podcast for you. Eric and Stephen do an incredible job leading conversations that cover a huge breadth of topics related to the ins and outs of building a thriving real estate portfolio while effectively navigating the market with leaders who've actually experienced success themselves. Highly recommend listening and subscribing. Josh, that's a terrific review. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that for us. It's not just for us, it's for the listeners, Stephen.
Yeah, and so on that subject, Josh, thank you for that wonderful essay, really. But we need those reviews because when we go out looking for guests, they go looking to see what people have to say and whether they'll have people listening to them. So please take the time on social media, on Google, on Apple to give us a review and just help us keep finding qualified guests for our show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for us to find a qualified guest, and we try to do as best we can to get the best possible guests. And when they're doing research, whether they're going to invest time with us, they look at your reviews to see what you guys have said. So if you've not done so already, please take a minute just to go onto your iPhone or even leave us a comment section on our website and go to the iTunes store and leave a review or on the website, either one. We'll read it out aloud. We really appreciate you guys and hearing from you and your feedback. So, Stephen, now we're really going to get on to our guest.
Today we have with us Jeff Rosenfeld. Jeff is the Executive Vice President and founding partner of Adivo Construction based in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Jeff, welcome to the Invest Florida show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, Jeff, we really appreciate you investing time with us today. We've been excited about getting someone on the show to talk about current trends in construction and remodeling, refurbishing of multifamily. And I know you guys do a pretty broad reach of different commercial properties, but we're going to focus today on the multifamily side. So, welcome to the show. Appreciate you participating with us. Can you give us sort of maybe a 30,000 foot overview of the multifamily market? And I know that's a tough nut to crack in Florida because it's broad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the multifamily market continues to flourish in the Florida area. Of course, there's some limiting factors that have taken place since COVID has come into play, and this existed prior to COVID, is that there's a somewhat dearth of inventory. So of the available multifamily properties that would be considered a value-added opportunity, one where you can infuse capital and raise the rents and contribute to the value of the overall asset, those opportunities are few and far between, most of which are listed through traditional broker avenues right now, the Marcus and Millichaps of the world. The best opportunity now for investors is to potentially identify what's called an off-market opportunity, and that would be through an asset owner that may not have been contemplating listing their property for sale, but may have held it for a long period of time. Could have been generational money where if somebody approached them with a reasonable offer, they may be very much induced to sell. And those are what we're seeing as probably the best ways to for an asset owner to potentially acquire or identify a potential asset. Now, relative to the markets that we see particular strength in, those are Tampa, which happens to be one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, and the multifamily market there is not only expanding from a new construction standpoint, but there's a tremendous amount of redevelopment going on there as well, and that's due to the population influx from the Northeast. I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of the fact that there's been somewhat of a demographic shift of people moving out of highly concentrated urban areas into areas that offer more open space and perhaps a more conducive lifestyle. And the beneficiaries of those have been primarily the southern states, including Florida, Texas, Arizona, and some other areas. So we see particular strength in that area. South Florida has always been a very strong market, not only because of the lifestyle here, but because of the influence of South American wanting to live in the area and also wanting to invest in the area as well. We also see tremendous strength on the Treasure Coast, the Space Coast, and in the Jacksonville area as well. In addition to that, Central Florida, even though Disney is not up and operational, is still showing, reasonable strength in that market and very large interest in acquiring properties in those markets as well.
So let's talk a little bit about construction costs, because there was, the last few years, there was the quotas and the tariffs and things that came down the pipe. And then you had COVID. So there's been a lot of disruptions in the market. Can you talk to us sort of what's been going on with construction costs over the last few years and maybe even the last year since COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's been a significant increase in raw material expense in addition to the increase in costs that affects primarily appliances, HVAC, and some lumber materials. It's also affected the availability of some of those materials as well. When the previous administration was in place, there were some tariffs in place that were restrictive for bringing in foreign goods. Candidly, our company doesn't use any foreign-made products, but for those that import products, it's been particularly challenging to get appliances and HVAC equipment, which is usually an important component of an apartment complex renovation. So for the companies that have strong vendor relationships and have the ability to acquire these products in bulk, they're better suited to supply the end user or the asset owner with the materials necessary to renovate their properties. So I guess with that being said, yes, there has been an increase in material costs across the board, specifically in lumber, which has increased almost 100% over the last year. And then there's been supply constraints and increase in prices on appliances, fixtures, and primarily HVAC equipment.
So what's this is finished on this thought, Stephen. What's the outlook on construction cost? Have you guys got any visibility yet? Is it just too new in this administration to get an idea of what's going on?
The uncertainty with the marketplace right now is just, it's too uncertain. Like, for argument's sake, to give you an example, we're one of the largest buyers from Goodman, which is an AC manufacturer. Their whole plant had to close down due to COVID. So it's very hard for us to, extrapolate off of that to know when the plant's going to be up and running again and when they're going to go into full production. So, in a situation like that, we rely on one of our other vendors. So it appears that until there is some consistent, reasonable distribution of the vaccine where people feel comfortable in going back to their workplace, especially manufacturing operations, that there will continue to be, spotty shortages on certain materials, and the cost of those materials will increase based on supply and demand. More people looking for those same products and less product available in the market will continue to drive up pricing.
So let's talk a little bit, and maybe you can tell us how strategies have changed in today's market. The conventional model was you buy a multifamily that you renovate, you add value, you increase the rents and increase the asset value, and those properties are very, very hard to find right now. What other strategies are investors able to find with multifamily where they can do something from a construction point of view and generate a return on their investment?
Certainly COVID's been a disruptor, so I would think some of these asset classes, maybe there's an opportunity for repurposing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you look at the hotel sector, for argument's sake, occupancy rates at hotels are down some 70 and 80%, and the delinquency rate of hotel operators to pay their notes and the landholders across the country is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30% delinquency, with Florida being closer to 40%. So for the savvy investor that has a long time frame associated with how long they're going to hold the asset, we're seeing a tremendous amount of what is called adaptive reuse. And what I mean by that are people are taking either hotels, suite-style hotels, and or available commercial loft space and converting that into multifamily, because there is such a demand for affordable housing down here in Florida. Most of the housing here now is priced out of the realm for a person that wants to move into a starter type opportunity. So by taking what might be previously a hotel or another real estate type and converting it to multifamily, it makes more inventory available on the marketplace and allows an asset owner who customarily deals specifically in multifamily to continue to do value-added improvements, but just using a different platform by which to do it.
Let's talk a little bit about the state as in regards to the repurposing. Let's dig down in that a little bit. Are there areas of the state that you see more opportunity for this repurposing than others?
Sure. And Central Florida is a perfect example. When you close down Disney, you probably cut off a flow of not only tourists, but local Florida residents in the hundreds of thousands that visit that area. So if you look at any of the surrounding hotels around the Disney area, those are ones that are probably most dramatically affected and probably the ones that are most ripe for the picking relative to somebody that could take those assets over, get the appropriate, change of use permitting in place, and then do an adaptive reuse, because those are the hotels that have been most violently affected by the downturn in, tourist travel. That's not to say that opportunities like that don't exist on the coast as well, because general tourism to Florida has been on the downturn. What has increased is people interested in moving to the state due to COVID, but from out of state and out of country tourism, that has gone down. So I wouldn't say globally throughout the state. I would say Central Florida more so. But I think any hotel opportunity where there's a concentration of other multifamily assets in the area and a good worker base would be a viable asset to convert to multifamily.
And how receptive are the local municipalities and counties to doing this use? One of the things that everybody suffered through in this last crisis is the amount of time that it gets to change zoning and use and get permits, and also neighborhood opposition. What have you encountered in this arena?
Yeah, that's not a short term. Obviously, there's more planning involved than just picking up an asset and then, converting it or renovating it to increase rents and overall returns. With an adaptive reuse, you need to, as I indicated earlier, get a change of use and the appropriate permitting. So for opportunities of those type, it's more so for institutional investors and or publicly traded companies that have a longer time horizon, because you're absolutely correct. Until you can get the permitting in place and the change of use in place, no construction work can be consummated on the project. So there's a longer lead time to actually convert the project over, but they're extremely profitable at the back end of the process.
Let's talk a little bit about, because it gets my brain spinning a little bit, when you talk about repurposing an asset, the demand for workforce housing is huge. And because in the last decade or so, we've had this massive increase in not only construction costs, but also in land values, which really makes the sweet spot for construction in the super class A arena. Jeff, please tell me you've got some solutions for workforce housing out there. Some of this repurposing, is that the possibility? Because we really have a pretty dire need.
Yeah, I believe it is. And I hear what you're saying. And it's not only the two factors that you mentioned, it's also the increase in labor costs. So the combination of an increase in materials, increase in land cost, and increase in labor costs makes it unprofitable for the home builders to build homes lesser than $350,000 to $400,000. So yes, there's an affordability crisis in Florida as well as many other states. And I believe if these assets, these distressed hotel assets, can be picked up at a negative discount to current market value, it affords the investor the opportunity to infuse capital into the project without overspending on it, which would allow them to present those units at a more agreeable price point for somebody that may be looking for either a first-time rental or a starter home.
But besides the hotel sector, are there any other types of assets that you think are ripe for investigation for investors?
Well, most of the commercial assets, and you can, because that's your expertise on your side, you could probably speak more intelligently on that. But from my understanding, most of the commercial assets are usually large sprawling spaces which really don't lend themselves to conversion to multifamily. Now, if there are loft-style old factories or perhaps, commercial spaces that have good bones, in other words, solid structures, good foundations, and good bones, clearly those can be converted as well. But my sense is the availability of those types of opportunities are far less than what would be available with hotels, because Florida is a tourist destination. There's a tremendous amount of hotels down here.
And you mentioned another hot point for me, Jeff. Appreciate if you'd kind of talk a little bit about the labor situation, because I don't think people, when they're coming from out of state, understand what 2008 did to our labor market. And then you got, whacked from 2012, this exponential increase in construction in the state of Florida as we recovered without the labor force. So can you talk a little bit about what's going on in the labor force right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. The 2006 downturn that bled into 2008 took a lot of people that were immersed in construction and got them looking at other industries because there was a total lack of demand. So people that left the industry and found other occupations, quite candidly, have not gravitated back. And as you indicated, the amount of work that's required now has expanded exponentially. So you got the perfect storm going on. You got more construction work required and less skilled labor available to do that particular work. Now, you can't invent workers, obviously, but a lot of schools now are skewing some of their courses toward more technical in nature, more construction in nature. Now, as it relates to our company, and that's why we took on this posturing, we're a self-performing company. So when I go either to a location in Florida or out of state, I don't have to rely on local labor, and my labor cost doesn't vacillate because all of my employees are W-2 employees to my company. So my labor cost for argument's sake, in Corpus Christi, Texas, would be the same it is in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, or a project that we're currently working on in Fort Myers, Florida, where we're doing a different type of adaptive reuse. That's a luxury apartment complex where they're having absorption issues with their 3-2 units, and decided that it made more sense to split the 3 2s into 2 1s in studios. And since we've done that, they got 100% absorption on those units. So a lot of times an adaptive reuse isn't necessarily to increase revenue. It's also to stabilize the asset as well.
It's really interesting when you talk about, and I don't want to bash the generation that's coming out of school right now, but you see them complaining about, hey, all I can find is a $12 or $13 an hour customer service job. And I'll mention to them, you can make $100,000 a year as a second-year journeyman, AC journeyman. How come you don't do that? They're like, that's not really what I went to school for.
Yeah, I know. It's just got, it's got that bad stigma that, people associate the fact that construction is a blue-collar type opportunity, and that's clearly not the case. I mean, most of the clients we deal with are professional and executives. The asset owners are all professionals, and the career opportunities that you've alluded to offer tremendous opportunities for, kids coming out of college that don't want to expend, $150,000 on a 4-year college and can go to a technical school where they're willing to train them, and there'll be just a plethora of jobs waiting for them when they come out of school. So I totally agree with your commentary. How do we convince people to take more of those opportunities? I'm not sure. I think it's more of a mindset of the individuals that are entering the workforce and their perception of how construction is.
I mean, it drives me bananas because, I'm a person, I have advanced degrees, so what? I've got advanced degrees from, great schools, so what? It doesn't matter. And it's, all you hear from the politicians is college, let's get college paid for it. Man, get these kids, figure out a way to get them, they swing a hammer and work on an electrical system. And, we have such a demand for it. I mean, it just seems like such a waste of resources to me to be spending so much time and energy on focusing on college when, guys that can go out and gals can go out and, figure out an electrical system and an AC system they're needed badly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you think about, without getting into politics, thinking about the platform for the current administration, they're talking infrastructure. Well, that's wonderful, but you need skilled labor to perform that type of work. And there's a dearth of qualified labor currently. So there's going to be even more stress on the labor market as we continue to move forward, if they move forward with that particular initiative.
What's the outlook? The outlook is, if the administration is going to have infrastructure build and you're going to put more stress on the labor market, you're going to have increase in labor costs. So that really answered the question I was going to ask now. Stephen, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right.
Jeff, here's a question that I think about a lot. So we have the situation where we don't have labor and we don't have enough employees. The costs are going up. how is the construction industry adapting? You know, in every other enterprise, we're looking at technology and we keep reading about these things that are coming, you know, whether it'll be molding and preformed. What kinds of innovative
3D printing?
Yeah, 3D printing. What kind of things do you see the construction?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff sounds very good theoretically on an applicational standpoint. There are companies out there doing, dried timber, trying to construct buildings and ship them via rail. Logistically, it just doesn't make sense. When you work on an asset, you have to have everything, all your materials, all your labor and everything right there. That's not to say that we don't use technology such as drones and other technology in order to get better views of impaired roofs or AC systems or cameraing systems to look at underground sewer lines to make sure that their sewer system is intact. But relative to technology, there's some implementation that on the asset owner side, when you come to final finishes, they're looking at smart locks or bioidentification or Nest type thermostats. Some of that technology is being integrated into the renovation work we do, and we utilize some technology quite a bit, both internally at the office and also to track the cadence of the project and also to evaluate the current condition of the assets we're working on. But there's no magic bullet out there where there's some technology that's going to solve the labor issue. In order to get construction work done, you need qualified people that understand the nature of their skill set and what they're working on to effectively get a project done to its completion. But not to say in the future there might not be some type of technology that could help make workers in the field more effective, but I don't see robots doing construction work.
Yeah, and just beating a dead horse on that is that the 2008 flush, man, you took so many talented folks out of the equation, and those are the people that that when those masters were teaching 5 juniors, and right. you took those guys out, and now you lost almost an entire generation of experienced workers. Now, Jeff, you guys are based in Deerfield Beach, Florida.
That's correct. Yeah, Deerfield Beach, Florida, which is Broward County, kind of juxtaposition between the Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale International Airports, which makes it convenient for us as we do projects throughout the country. It's good to have access to 2 international airports. Well,
that was what I was going to ask you. You guys are doing all over the country. So how would you compare the Florida markets with the other markets around the country that you're working in?
Well, I can tell you Florida is, there's tremendous interest in Florida. I just got off the phone with a Canadian buyer that bought 6 assets here. So the interest in Florida is not only from the U.S., it's internationally and Canadian as well. But if you want me to speak to other markets that we see pockets of activity, tremendous activity in the Midwest, tremendous activity in the Carolinas. We're working on multiple projects in Phoenix right now. We've probably done north of 30 projects in the state of Texas. The gravitation is such that people are following the warmer weather where they have an opportunity to experience more of their lifestyle on the outside and not be so confined to an 80-story tower, perhaps in the New York area, where you have to get into an elevator with 15 other people, especially with the current environment we're in now.
So let's talk a little bit about the value add. And I know you said that it's few and far between the deals that you're finding. Are there commonalities?
Well, let me just clarify that. We are a strategic partner to the asset owners, so we're not necessarily the ones looking for the asset. What I'm conveying to you is the feedback I get when I talk to my clients day in and day out is that they're having difficulty in identifying viable, value-added opportunities where they can infuse capital and really yield a good return on investment on the backside. With that being said, that's always been the case with multifamily. You gotta really, you make your money on the buy when you buy the asset at a price below market, and then of course, based on the capital infusion, is the barometer by which you can gauge how much increase in rent you can get and what the overall returns on the asset may be.
So let's talk about that a little bit. When they are finding value add deals, is there a commonality of the type of value add that you're doing to improve the property, or is it just across the board?
Yeah, the biggest, and I hate to use this expression, it's colloquial, but the biggest bang for your buck you get when you take on any asset is, of course, to improve the outside first. By making improvements to the exterior facade of the building, it gives an indication to the local demographics or anybody driving by the property that there's potential improvements going on the inside. If you just renovate all your interior units and your common areas and your amenities and leave the exterior of the building the same, you're not going to drive enough traffic to get the necessary absorption for your improvements.
So do you see any solution in the longer term for more affordable housing and where investors could?
I see a lot of asset owners focusing on that, but as you know, there's certain parameters by which Eric, you laid that out very eloquently. You can't change the value of land right now. You can't get materials at a lesser price point until things loosen up a little bit with the vaccine, and because of the dearth of labor right now, you can't really reduce your labor expense. So, unfortunately, there's no panacea or a magic bullet where I could say to you, hey, I see this in the future, and that's going to alleviate the need for affordable housing. I think it's going to need to be a concerted effort on the part of the government to make some of these properties available or to supplement certain types of construction to build affordable housing from the ground up, or maybe offer incentives, which they've done through the opportunity zones. I mean, the original concept behind the opportunity zone was to incentivize asset owners to go into distressed areas where there is a dearth of affordable housing and improve that housing, not to increase the rent, but to make it more habitable for the people living in the area. So if the current administration continues to move forward with the opportunity zones, I believe they're headed in the right direction and supplementing what could be an increase in affordable housing. But as I said, there's no specific answer based on what Eric has said, that there's three price factors that are driving the cost of housing up, and there's no way to mitigate those.
So, Jeff, if people want to reach you and learn a little bit more, perhaps have a project, how can they reach you?
Well, they can reach us a couple of different ways. Our website address is the name of the company. It's www.adivoconstruction.com. We also can be reached through our toll-free number, which is 833-825-2425, or anybody that logs onto our website can see a very good example of work we've done throughout the country, so they can get a sense for our attention to detail, the fit and finish that we strive for on every project. And there's a place on the website where they can request information. When we do connect with an asset owner, if they have a viable project, we're willing to fly out there, walk the asset with them to help them identify value engineer or VE opportunities. And that's a way for an asset owner to get the same look and feel on their asset without necessarily spending the same amount of money, and then having potentially extra money available for, FF&E, or perhaps something they may not have included in their original scope of work.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what's in your breadbasket in terms of deal size. Obviously, you're not going to come to Tampa for a duplex, so
no.
Let's talk about like what that deal size looks like.
Yeah, and I get this question by clients just like I get the question, how much does it cost to renovate a unit? We look at each job on its own merit, candidly, because we are a self-performing company, have to deploy our crews out to a location. We usually bring on connexes with 2 rounds of materials. And what I mean by that, in order to keep the cadence of the project in alignment with the asset owner's expectations, we always have a round of materials for the units we're renovating, and then a backup round. God forbid if there's any material delays, it doesn't slow down the process of the project. So with that being said, that's how we try to prepare ourselves to make sure that when we take on a project, that it gets done to completion, doesn't hold up the asset owner, and they don't suffer any loss to lease, because it's nice to get, a good price on renovation work, but if that particular contractor doesn't have the capability or resources to renovate that unit and put it back online within one rent cycle, the asset owner has to add in whatever that representative rent would be for the period of time that asset is unrentable.
Gotcha. So now that we're wrapping up here, Jeff, give us last thoughts to multifamily investors now and maybe outlook for the future.
Yeah, the multifamily market is still strong, not only in Florida, but throughout the country. It just takes an additional level of research to identify what's not very apparent, not necessarily going through traditional broker avenues, even though brokers offer tremendous opportunities and have far reach in identifying asset. It's always best if you could use alternative methods to identify an asset. And my final comment is, and I hear this from my clients all the time, is the expenditure you make on improving your property is a one-time expenditure that is depreciable. The amount of money you get from rent is in perpetuity. So don't try to save $1,000 on your renovation, because you'll end up giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential rent that you could derive if you put that extra money into improvement of the property.
Awesome. Good points here. Stephen, anything else before we let Jeff go?
No, Jeff, thank you very much. And we look forward to speaking to you again.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure being on your podcast, and I appreciate both your time. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. And that was Jeff Rosenfeld from Adivo Construction in Deerfield Beach. Stephen, what were your thoughts?
Well, I have to tell you, his final statement was something that resonated with me, because it's just common sense, but people often don't think that way, and that is expense is just a one-time thing and it's depreciable, whereas the rent that you will receive from that is in perpetuity. So don't forego potential rent by being cheap on the expense part when it's required.
Well, a lot of people mistake expense for investment. And that was, I think, the point that Jeff was trying to make, is that, investment is an investment. You're going to get a return on it. So run your numbers, just as if you're putting $1 in and you're expecting X dollar in return. It's the same thing on your renovations. Jeff was a great guest, Stephen. Where can we get other great guests?
The one place to go is www.investfloridashow.com. There we have archives going back years now from lots of different people on investment real estate. And really, we do focus on Florida, and there's a wealth of information if you want to educate yourself by going there.
Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odum and Stephen Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.